Hello and welcome to MiniMAX, the benchtop self-assembly wet blast cabinet for the home hobbyist user. The purpose of this video is to very briefly, very quickly go through a few tips and tricks as to how to assemble the cabinet, put it together as easily as possible and as quickly as possible, and to give you a bit of an insight as to where everything fits and how it all goes together. You'll have received the cabinet in a nice sturdy wooden palletised box. What we suggest you do is open that carefully. You can take a flat-ended screwdriver and prise the metal lugs up, which allows you just to lift the lid off. Try and do that if you can, rather than breaking the cabinet open. There is a lot of flexible steel parts in there, so you don't want to damage them in opening the crate. And likewise, if there's anything wrong with the machine and you need to return it to us, it needs to come back in the original packaging. So again, if the crate's damaged, we've got a problem with that as well. So take the lid off carefully. You'll be confronted with a lot of parts in there. You've got a lot of sheet metal work. You've got a lot of components in there. And if you've ordered the machine with the leg extension kit, there'll be a separate box in there with that as well. The purpose of this video is really walk you through the process of how it goes together. It's nowhere near as bad as it may first appear when you open the crate. In simple terms, the cabinet itself, the top section here, is constructed of two end panels, a main body panel and a back panel. So we've only got 4 pieces of metal to join together, and we've got half the machine built. When we come to the sump underneath, we've got a front, a back, 2 sides and a base. So again, we've only got 5 pieces of metal, and we've got the sump made. It's simply a case of then pop riveting the 2 together, and we've actually got the bulk of the machine sat there completed. When you come to the actual construction of the cabinet and the sump, time's got to be taken to seal it properly. We've got a machine that's going to sit with 20 litres of water in it, and then when we're operating the machine, we're going to be using 50-60 psi of air pressure to eject that water under quite a lot of force against a part, and the overspray of that's going to be hitting all the sides of the cabinet. So all the joints need to be really thoroughly sealed, otherwise you're going to get leaks, you're going to get drips, etc. So as you put the machine together, whilst the construction of the machine will go together very quickly and very easily, you need to be meticulous in how you seal all the joints as you put the machine together. Get it right and you'll never need to do it again. Cut corners and go very quick about sealing, and you'll be forever chasing leaks. So take your time, seal everything properly as you put it together. The machine will work perfect from the outside. When you open up the toolbox that's in with the machine, you're confronted with all of these parts, which can look quite daunting. It can look like there's an awful lot to do. It's surprising how quickly you use them and how quick the machine goes together. There's a list inside with everything ticked off as they're added to a kit, so there's a couple of little bits not ticked off on this particular list, but you can see this will be in with every box. So when you open it, you'll see everything's been checked off. You should have every part that you need in order to make the machine. Fairly straightforward in what's actually inside the box. You've got your tub of media as well, so if you've ordered some media from us, that's what the 5 kilo tub looks like. Inside the toolbox, we've got the gauntlet holders that go on the front of the machine. These have got self-adhesive tape layer on, so these literally just pop rivet onto the front of the machine, and then peel the tape off, the gauntlet pops through the hole and it doubles back, goes on there, and then you've got a Jubilee clip goes around the outside to hold it in place, as per the picture. Once you've got the gauntlets out of the way, you've then got the gun and the nozzle in there. So you've got the gun with the nozzle already in there. When you get the gun, one thing to double check with these, it's worthwhile just taking the front off, and what you've got inside is a bore-on nozzle. Just make sure you see that's got PTFE tape around it. That's there just so it's a tight fit, so it doesn't drop out of there. Make sure that's a tight fit and it's not loose. Make sure that rubber collar around there isn't loose as well. So you can put that back together, just tighten it up. These, unscrew them, put a bit of PTFE tape round them, fasten them back in. It just stops them dripping whilst you're holding them. So that's your gun in that box. You've got your door catch there, you've got your door catch spacers, you've got your bulkhead fitting, which the hose tail goes on the inside of. You've got your special fitting for the sump that the tap attaches to. We've got the Jubilee clips that go onto the pipes, which feed from the pump and from the airline. We've also got the door seal, the window seal. We've got a tube of sealant. We've got the data plate that goes on the back of the machine with your serial number on. You got the foot pedal, you got the electrics box with a solenoid valve, you got the window, and then we've got a few bags of hardware. We've got a bag there with the hinges in. We've got 2 bags of bolts. The bolts are used for attaching the door and also the top strip of the window so that it's removable. You've got 2 big bags of short rivets. These are the ones that are used for the construction of the cabinet and also for the sump and attaching the legs and the braces. You've got 1 bag of longer rivets there. They're used for attaching the gauntlet holders and also the exhaust to the back of the cabinet. So whilst it looks like you've actually got an awful lot of parts here, it's surprising how quickly these get used up and how quickly they get attached to the machine. Things like a data plate are just simply 2 pop rivets in there. Door catchers, simply 4 bolts in there, 3 bolts in there. Clips are used on the pipes, 2 fittings that go through the bulkhead, spacer for behind the door catch, special fitting inside the machine that holds the tap in there. These things all bolt on and go together very quickly. Once you've got the gun inside the machine and you put your PTFE around your joints, you check the nozzles tight in there, the airline comes to the back of the gun. So the airline that's going through the bulkhead in the back of the cabinet comes in, goes onto the straight one in the back of the gun. The one that's coming up at an angle from the bottom of the gun is the one that comes from the pump. It's important you put that onto the pump. The other thing that's very important as well is when you're actually using the machine, you've got a solenoid valve on the back of the machine. So what that's doing is it's going to open when you press the foot pedal and it's going to let the air through at the same time as turning the pump on for the water feed. So it's imperative you always have the air supply turned onto the machine before activating the machine and pressing the foot pedal. If you don't have the air supply on, what will happen is you'll press the foot pedal, the pump will turn on, it'll feed water up, but there's no back pressure at the back of the gun because there's no air. So the excess water that can't squirt out the gun is going to feed back down the airline and it's going to go straight into the solenoid valve, which is going to wipe the solenoid valve out. So what you can do is you can look at hardware shops, places like Amazon, eBay, etc. Try and find say a one-way valve. You could maybe fit in there. We don't fit them as standard because we've tried to make the system as simple as possible. But if you're worried about maybe turning the machine on without air being connected, then fit a one-way valve just before the solenoid valve, and that will stop water going back down and into the solenoid valve. But generally speaking, just have the air on before you turn the machine on. You'll never have a problem. When we come to the actual construction of the cabinet, the whole cabinet has been designed in a CAD program, so it's very, very tight on tolerance. Everything's been modelled up so it's a perfect fit on all the panels. The panels where they interlock with each other, so where you've got this panel coming under this one, and then we have the holes all the way around it that need to be pop riveted together, are very, very tight on tolerance. That's done on purpose so that once it is pop riveted together we get a very tight joint and there's less chance of leaks from the cabinet once it's been constructed. What it does mean is when you start to put panels together, you need to make sure you do line everything up properly. If it's not lined up perfectly, what you'll find is some of the holes end up being slightly out. So if you get it lined up here and start pop riveting round, by the time you get to here, you may be a fraction out on a hole. It's not the end of the world if that's the case. What you can do is take a standard 5mm drill on a cordless drill and just ease the hole, open the hole up slightly so you can still get the rivet in. The best way of putting it together though is to put a rivet in the middle of one panel, middle of the next panel, aligning the panels, so putting force on to get them to line up, and then a rivet in the middle of the next panel. That then means you can work your way out to the edges, and the edges will all line up perfectly as you're doing it. If you work from you'll find that you're forever chasing holes, and you'll have to open more and more holes up. So it's better to try and get a rivet in the middle. We use these, which are a perfect item. You can buy them online. Amazon do them relatively inexpensive. They're called Clicos, C-L-I-C-O, and it's basically a spring-mounted temporary rivet. So when you push it in, it goes nice and thin. When you let it out, it spreads and grips. These allow us just to put these in the holes, so we can pop them in the hole. It's a temporary rivet. It holds everything together whilst we actually go around with the rivet gun and pop rivet everything up. As we've got rivets in either side, what we'd do then is simply come back, take the Clico back out, replace it with a proper rivet. These are really handy. If you don't have access to these, or they're too expensive, you can do a similar thing just using a standard 4mm bolt. So you can put a bolt through the hole, tighten it up loosely, just finger tight, put a bolt through a hole down here and pull it into alignment that way. Building the cabinet, very straightforward. There's only essentially 4 panels to it. We've got a right hand panel, a left hand panel, the main body panel, and then we have a back panel that goes in as well. Side panels obviously overlap the main panel, same with the other side, that comes in and the flanges are on the outside. Take all the protective coating off before you start assembling, otherwise it can get difficult to remove. Once we've finished putting the 2 sides on, the back panel then simply slides up on the inside of the flanges, so the back panel fits on the inside, and again just pop rivets in place, exactly the same as the 2 side panels have done. So that's the main body built at that point. It's simply a case of 2 side panels to pop rivet on and a back panel to slide in and pop rivet in place. The second major component that you come to assemble is the sump, which is simply 5 panels. Everything's pre-bent again, everything's pre-drilled. So you've got a left-hand panel, a right-hand panel, a front panel which has the slope to it, and the back panel which is the flat one. You've then got a panel that goes in at the bottom which joins all 4 together. The construction of this, again, we've temporarily put it together just using the Clicos, just to make sure everything fits and it all goes together as we'd expect it to. Again, working from your middle out, so put a rivet in the middle first and then rivet out to the sides is the best way to get the best alignment with it. You've got a lot of panels coming together in this particular component, and it's always better because this is where the water's going to sit in the machine. It's better to try and make this as watertight as possible in the construction. So what we'd advise to do, before actually fastening the panels together, run a bead of the sealant down the actual inside of the flange. Then put the panels together, and as you pop rivet it together, it'll squeeze that sealant between the 2 panels and it'll create a sealed layer between the 2 panels. Once you pop rivet it all together, we'd then suggest going up every joint all the way around, every single joint, with another bead of sealant, and either using a rag or your finger, just smooth it over so you get a definite seal edge to edge on both panels. If time's taken properly over doing that, you'll get it perfectly sealed from the outset. So again, when you come to the bottom, this panel, you've got a lot of holes to line up in the bottom panel. It fits better one way than another, so take your time, look at it as you place it in, how the holes are lining up. If they don't look like they're lining up down one side or another edge, turn it around 90 degrees, try it again, have a look. Once you're happy with the orientation and most of the holes are lining up as you'd expect, again, pop rivet, but from the outside, so you want to be pop riveting from the outside in to the sump. Pop rivet just the 4 centre ones to start with, like we're showing there with the Clicos. Once you've got the 4 centre ones in, if you need to ease any of the other holes, you can simply just run a drill through with a 5mm drill, just to open them up slightly. Before placing this base panel in, run a big bead of sealant all the way around the flange, sit the base panel on sealant, pop rivet it in place, and then run sealant around it again to make sure it's fully sealed. You've simply got the 4 panels together and the base there, all pop riveted from the outside. So the heads of the rivets want to be on the outside all the way around. So when we come to pop rivet the sump up, we want to pop rivet it from the outside, so the heads of the rivets go on the outside of the sump. All the rivets that we use are a sealed rivet, so in theory this should be watertight once they've been compressed and put in place. Occasionally an odd rivet may leak, you may get an odd drip from a rivet. It's simply a case of going back in and just smearing some sealant over that rivet if that's the case, but pretty much they're pretty good usually. Once you've put all the rivets in, you've then got a tap to fit in the bottom there, which is done simply the tap on the outside, special fitting on the inside, 2 screw together. Again, use a bit of sealant around that as you fit it, make sure it's watertight, and that's the sump complete. So the whole sump to the machine is literally only 5 panels. You've got 4 side panels and a base. The whole cabinet to the machine that we showed you earlier is literally only 4 panels, 2 sides, a main body and a back panel. So between those two items you've actually got the bulk of the cabinet built. The final stage then is to attach the sump to the actual cabinet. So we'll do a quick mock-up on this with it sort of fairly open, and then I've got another cabinet that we've already part assembled, so I'll show you that as well. One of the final stages of the assembly of the cabinet, obviously you'll have this side panel, you'll have the back panel in there as well. I've left those off so you can see better inside for the purposes of the assembly video. The last stage is to attach the sump to the actual cabinet. Again, I've just got it held in place with temporary clecos at the moment. Again, you could do the same, just put a 4mm bolt through the centres just to line everything up, and then pop rivet around the others. What I suggest doing before attaching these two together, these two components together, is run a bead of sealant all the way around this first, and then offer the two components together, and then you've got a much better chance of a nice tight water seal around the two components when they're together that way. Two will go together very straightforward. Again, with this you've got trays that will sit inside the machine when you've finished it. So ideally you actually want to pop rivet this from the inside of the cabinet. So you want the flat heads to the rivets on the inside of the cabinet, not on the outside. You want the tails of the rivets to be hanging down outside. That gives you a nice flat ledge all the way around that your two trays can sit on without them being uneven. When you've got the cabinet pretty much built and almost finished, you'll have something that hopefully looks a bit like this. You've got the side panels connected and pop riveted in place. The bottom section that holds the window in gets pop riveted all the way across the bottom. The seal simply just clips on around. What we suggest doing is putting the joint to the seal at the top, so that when water sprays against the window it's not got a weak area, it's not going to seep through a joint. So start up here, feed the seal round and end up there. The seal, when you first get it and take it out and try and attach it on here, will seem quite long. It'll seem like it's been significantly over length the way we've cut it. You want to allow about 25mm over length before you trim it to size. Don't trim it exactly to size because the rubber will shrink back over time. So cut the seal about 1 inch longer than it needs to be, 25mm longer, and then simply pull the two edges away, feed them in together, and then force the seal flat across the two flat bits here. You will find it will push and it will condense into place. That way it will stay a really tight seal forever. Slot the window in. Once the window has been slotted in and you've lent it back, the top strip bolts in. So this isn't riveted, you've got in the pack that's in the toolbox, you've got some short bolts that go in there. That bolts the top strip in, so that if you ever need to replace the window, it's simply a case of unbolting the top strip, window lifts back out. 2 gauntlet holders that we showed you in the toolkit. Simply go into there and pop rivet into the holes that's already in the case. Again, what I'd suggest doing, run a bead of sealant around the edge before offering it up and pop riveting it in. And again, for the purpose of alignment, you could put a bolt through one end, a bolt through another, and then pop rivet between, taking the bolts out to then finally pop rivet fully. These are made from a HDPE plastic, so they are quite flexible, so you will find that you may need to ease a couple of the holes with a 5mm drill just to get everything to line up properly. So 2 of those to fit to the front. The exhaust port fits on the back of the machine, so you've got a big hole in the back that literally just pop rivets on the back, and again, bead of sealant round it before putting it in and pop riveting it into place. You've got in the bottom of it a half-moon cutout. That half-moon cutout must be from the bottom. The idea of that is, as media is spraying against it, it can't enter the exhaust and out the machine. It's going to hit the cover and drop back down. The outside of this has been machined and designed to accept a standard 68mm drain pipe. So you can go to a local hardware store, you can buy a 90-degree bend, push that in, and then you can buy a metre of drain pipe and fit that, and that gives you an exhaust port that no media is going to come out, but it's going to let the air out the cabinet so that you're not pressurising the cabinet whilst using it. So that simply pop rivets on the back. Once you've got those 2 parts fitted, it's really a case of just attaching the gauntlets, which we've got some pictures of, you'll see now. So you can see the gauntlets attached on there. And then it's a case of hanging the door to the side. So we've got 2 hinges to pop rivet on, a door to hang, the furniture to fit to the front. At that point, the cabinet's getting pretty well finished. The only parts we've got left to do are around the back of the cabinet, which we'll now show. Recording. So now we've got the cabinet turned round. As we were saying before, you've got the exhaust to fit on the back. That literally just pop rivets in there. Make sure you get the orientation the correct way. Bit of sealant round, pop rivet it in place. Below the exhaust port goes the electric box. So these 4 holes here are where the electric box simply bolts on or pop rivets in. And then below that you've got two holes there, which is where the data plate for the machine fits. Over at this side we've got a hole which is where the bulkhead fitting passes through. On the inside you have the hose tail connecting to the air line. On the outside you have the push connector. It's the end of that fitting that we were looking at earlier. So that bolts in from the inside of the cabinet. There's a bolt there that literally, once you've popped it through, that nut goes on, holds it in place, and then onto there you spin on the solenoid valve. From that solenoid valve then that connects through to your compressor, and that's your air line for the machine. Once you've got the bulkhead fitting in there and the solenoid on, the electric box and the data plate and the exhaust, that's everything from that area of the machine finished. We've then just got the 1 hole down here, which is where the cable for the pump comes through. So you simply take the pump, sit that in the bottom of the machine, on the base panel of the machine, and then through here you'll have a plate with a cable coming through. That plate just bolts onto the back there. The cable hangs loose, comes up and connects into the control box. You've got the pump cable to connect and the foot pedal to connect, and then all you've got to do is plug it in, pour water in, media, and you're up and running. This machine's shown with a leg extension kit fitted. If you've ordered a machine with a leg extension kit, that's simply 2 braces between each leg, and then it bolts to the bottom of the main legs on the cabinet. So to assemble the base, the leg extension kit, you've 2 braces at the back, 2 braces at the front, 2 braces at the left, 2 braces at the right, all pop riveting together. And then you've got 2 bolts on each leg to bolt it to, and that gives you a freestanding cabinet as opposed to a benchtop mounted cabinet. Once you've got the pump in, you've got the door on, all the other furniture's fitted, the window's in, it comes to a case of actually running the machine then. When we come to charge the machine for the first time, we're happy we've got all the leaks, everything's finished from an assembly point of view, we've sealed any weak areas, etc. We now wanted to start and load the machine for production. It's 20 litres of water that go into the sump of the machine and 2 kilos of media, so it's 10% against the water of the media. What I would suggest doing is put a kilo or 1.5 kilos of media in first and try running the machine. 2 kilos is really the maximum that you want to go to, and what you'll find, anything more than that you'll start to get a surge from the gun, so it'll pulse as it's operating. That's where you're starting to overload the actual pump within the machine, and you'll find that the machine's absolutely covered in media when you stop blasting. That's where you've got an indication of too much media in the machine. So what I'd suggest doing is putting 20 litres of water in, and then 1 kilo to 1.5 kilos of media to start with. Try a few parts, and if it's not quite cleaning quick enough, you put that extra 0.5 kilo in, but don't go above the 2 kilos in total. And that should be it. You should be up and running very successfully at that point. A few tips on maintenance and how to run the machine. It's a bit like car paint spraying, so you don't want to be all over the place with the gun and in circles and things like this. It's a nice steady progression across the surface of the part, and as I say, anybody who's done car paint spraying before, it's exactly the same sort of process. Keep the same distance from the part, run at a constant speed across the part. When you come down and do the next layer, you want to overlap it half with the pass that you've just done, so it's a nice steady even process. When you're blasting aluminium, try and set the machine so that when it's actually operational, you've got no more than 50 to 60 psi of air pressure. Because you've got a 170-300 micron glass media in there, that gives you the really nice satin aerospace type of finish to aluminium. But it's also a very soft media, so it's very easy to crack the glass and actually start embedding it in the surface of the part that you're cleaning. Anything above 60 psi, you're going to run the risk of doing that. So it's the same with the big commercial machines. They have to restrict down to 60 psi if they're doing glass, so there's no performance advantage with a big commercial machine over a little home hobby machine, because you're both going to be doing it at 60 psi ultimately on aluminium parts. Stick to 60 psi or below. Keep the water in good condition, so when it starts to get dirty, drain the water off, replenish it with fresh water, replace the media as and when required, and it should give you years of satisfactory service.